Hi everybody, welcome back to BATech Pro. It's Kevin. Today we're speaking about data mesh. Let's go into a bit more detail before we make any mistakes. Data mesh is a methodology. It's a way of working as opposed to an actual architecture or a tool. So one of the main parts of the data mesh methodology is that the data is actually decentralized. So what does that actually mean? It means that we have different departments or teams that are actually the custodians or the owners of that particular data. So let's think about sales, for example. You might have the sales department who are in charge of all the sales. You might have a technical team that's in charge of all the technical requests coming in. You might have a finance department in charge of your accounting. So it would then make more sense to get all your sales data from the sales team. It would make sense to get your finance data from the finance team. It would be better to get your technical data from your technical team. So the data is decentralized in that those people still own the data, but they are sharing it with other parts of the organization. So this is known as domain-driven data ownership. It makes a lot of sense because those people know the data better than everyone else. One of the issues that you have in some of these big organizations is that different people have different definitions of the same thing. So some people might have a definition of a client, which is different to someone else's definition of a client. Another team might have a different definition of what a sale is as opposed to what a different definition of a sale is in a different department. So these are all different definitions of a sale. It's not great when you have different people saying we have 10,000 sales, someone else says no, actually we have 9,500 sales, someone else says no, we have 11,000 sales. So which one's right? When you have someone who's the owner or the custodian of that data, it's a lot easier for you to then say, well, finance is in charge of that particular data, so we trust their numbers. So if someone else has something different, they need to go back and find out why they are differing from the sales team, why they're differing from the finance team. And this actually introduces something called data as a product, or DAP. Sounds like something sheep would say. And this is basically for ease of use and cross-functional sharing of data. And this can be shared in different ways. You can use something like Kafka, for example, which is a system that you can use for creating data streams, and you could be streaming data from your department into Kafka, which can then be shared by other departments as well. So data as a product actually looks at your data as an asset as opposed to just something that you're just sending out. So you might actually be able to take that data and say, well, we'll sell this data to you for a particular cost. Or maybe you're going to exchange this data for something else as well. So data as a product, or DAB, as you mentioned earlier on, can actually help you to bring more money or revenue into your business as well. Data Mesh also introduces a self-serve data platform. So think about it, you might have different types of users that are consuming your data. So you might have a technical team that's consuming data via Kafka. You might have an analyst team that's actually not going to be using Kafka. They'll connect to an OLAP cube and they'll connect to that via Power BI or Microsoft Excel. And with this type of methodology, you can cater for all types of users. And then also one of the main things is federated computational governance. What does that mean? It means that each department owns their data, as opposed to giving the data to someone else and then they massage it and change it, and then you don't actually know what actually happened and what's the truth. You always know that this person over there is the owner of the data, they're the custodians, and so you can always trust what's coming from them. So how does that differ from the traditional model? In the traditional model, we try to put everything together. So a lot of companies would try to make these massive data stores where they would have all the finance data and the sales data and the technical data put together. But there's always sort of a big mission to get that data put in there, to make it fit. Like I said, different people have different definitions of things. And now when you try to bring that data together, you sort of have these merge issues and nothing that makes sense anymore. Now there's tools such as data lakes have come along, which is a unstructured data store, so you can put all different types of data in. But still, it makes things very difficult when you're actually trying to do some analytics on the data because it's sort of all over the show, there's no structure, and so you always have to sort of dig around and find out what's there, what's not there, and yeah, it's not great. So usually what happens is that you have this one central data team, and they now have to get data from your sales team, they might get data from your finance team, from your technical team, but they don't actually understand how the data actually works. They don't understand all the inner workings of it. And so this is one of the bottlenecks in the business development on these enterprise data warehouses, or EDWs as they sometimes call it. It's very slow, it sometimes takes years, and usually it doesn't even complete in those couple of years, because it's just so much and the business is constantly evolving and changing, and there's no way for the central data team to keep up to date with everything that's happening in the business. So now the real question is, should you use a data mesh in your business? Well, think about it. If you already are sharing data with different parts of your company, and you have this issue of people saying, well, we have sales at 10,000, other people say, well, our sales are 11,000. That's probably showing that you need to have a custodian of that different type of data. You need to have someone who's a domain expert who's giving you that data and sharing it in the organization. If you're already using a central system, you might have certain issues at the moment, such as reprocessing data. So whenever data has to change, if it's put into the central system, reprocessing that whole thing is such a mission, depending on the size of the data. So if you're trying to move away from something like that, a data mesh is probably going to be better for you. Also in these EDWs, you have issues of data quality. So what I mentioned earlier on is a data lake. Yes, you can put a lot of data into data lakes, but you don't actually know what's put in there. And so the data quality might actually be very poor, and you might be looking at very old data is not being refreshed, incomplete data. So it's usually not the greatest thing to be looking at something like that. Usually what happens when you put a whole lot of data like that into one place, like a data lake, structured data, unstructured data, there's no metadata on top of it, so you actually know what you're looking at. Incomplete data, like I mentioned earlier on, you get something that's called a data swamp. And that just means that it's a whole lot of data put together, but no one actually knows what's actually going on in there. You don't want that, because it opens you up to a lot of liabilities, there might be a lot of security issues. There might be PII data in there that people shouldn't have access to, but you don't know because it's just a massive swamp of data. So these are the type of things you need to consider when you're actually looking at going into a data lake. So if you're already using a data lake or using a central system, maybe consider going onto a data mesh, so that the people that actually are creating the data at the source can control that data throughout the system. And usually in a lot of these big companies, it's very difficult for different departments to actually share that data. So you might want data from the finance department, and they might push back to say, well, they're busy with other priorities, they don't have time to work on this EDW system, and so it gets pushed down the list of priorities. And also people don't want to give away ownership of their data. So a data mesh allows them to maintain ownership. They won't change the way that they're doing the work. So just create a feed into something like Kafka, for example, and then from there, any changes that they make will go into Kafka to go through to the rest of the business. They can continue to do their work as per normal. They won't have to change the way they're doing their work that much. It will basically just be an extra step to say, well, now that we've done the data, add it onto this Kafka topic, for example. As opposed to now this EDW, whenever you have to make changes, you make change on your side, you have to make a change on EDW, you have to push it to everybody else, you have to reprocess your data, people complain, and you have to sort of schedule downtime, and it becomes a whole big mission on the enterprise. So the bigger the business, the harder it is to create this EDW. So a data mesh will definitely be better for a company that has a lot of different business units and different dev teams. So while data mesh does sound like something that's great, a lot of people have tried and failed. One of the things is that people don't actually have a full plan of how they're going to do the actual implementation. So you need to start thinking about things like what type of tech that you want to use. I have mentioned Kafka. There are other tools as well, such as Azure Event Hub, for example. These are all different ways of providing the different business units with live data. Also, you need to consider that there's going to be some large volumes of data that you must share as well. So you still have to have some sort of a warehouse that people can pull for the historic data as well. So there's a couple of things to consider. And also maybe the technology being used at the moment doesn't actually cater for that. So maybe you have a team that's only using SQL. You now need to upskill those guys to start using different things. So really, if it's something new that you're trying to introduce into your organization, maybe your company is just becoming a bit stale and the guys are bored and want something new, a data mesh will actually be something very cool to introduce, and it'll be something that won't change the world too much, but will still be introducing something new, some new tech, a new way of working, a way of thinking that can actually excite and spice up their current life. Hey, did you like that video? Click on that like button. Maybe click on subscribe and the bell notification so you'll be updated on new videos coming along the way. And also if you want something else, click on that video over there or click on that video over there. And I'll see you in the next one.